How well do we really know the people we admire? Can a perfect image hide a lifetime of quiet battles, unspoken truths, and choices that don't fit the story we want to believe? For years, Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward were the gold standard of Hollywood love. They were the couple that made everything look easy. Beauty, talent, and devotion all rolled into one perfect picture. But when their daughter Nell Newman spoke out at 63, she peeled back the layers of that glossy legacy and showed the world that even the brightest stars can cast long, complicated shadows. Her calm, quiet words carry the kind of honesty that can only come from a lifetime of silence. She said, "There are things about my family that were never what they appeared to be." That one sentence changed everything. Behind the elegant photos and glamorous events was a family built on both love and secrets. To the public, the Newman household in Westport, Connecticut, looked like a dream. Fame, fortune, and adoration surrounded them. They were the rare Hollywood couple who seemed immune to scandal and heartbreak. But according to Nell, what the world saw was only half the truth. Their home wasn't filled with constant laughter or endless peace. Sometimes, it was filled with long stretches of silence, the kind that carries weight heavier than words. There were mornings when Paul would leave suddenly, without reason or explanation. The family didn't ask where he went, and he didn't offer to tell. Joanne, always graceful in public, carried herself like a pillar of strength, but behind her calm eyes was the exhaustion of someone holding together a life that wasn't as seamless as it looked. In 1970, when Nell was just a teenager, a discovery in the family home changed how she saw her father forever. While searching for old family photos, she came across a folded piece of paper hidden inside one of Paul's old film scripts. It was a lease for a Manhattan apartment, registered under a company linked to one of his productions. No one in the family had ever heard of it. When Nell tried to ask about it, the air in the room shifted. Questions were met with silence, as if the less said, the better. Years later, a magazine investigation revealed that this same address had quietly hosted private meetings between Paul and a small group of industry friends. Nothing was public, nothing was documented, but whispers of those meetings never went away. To Nell, that apartment symbolized something bigger. A secret life her father carefully kept apart from the one the world adored. The more Nell looked back, the more patterns began to emerge. Her father's travel record showed unexplainable trips, often alone or with a few close companions from the film world. Among them were the writer Gore Vidal and director George Roy Hill, men who shared not just professional ties but a personal closeness that was rarely spoken of. Between 1969 and 1982, Paul made quiet trips to New York, Rome, and Stockholm. Receipts showed hotel bookings under initials, and notes in his handwriting that hinted at something deeply personal. "Dinner with G, same suite," one note read. Nell never claimed to know exactly what these details meant, but they painted a picture of a man living two distinct lives, one in front of the world and one behind carefully closed doors. Then came something even more unsettling. While reviewing her mother's personal papers, Nell found a letter marked, "Private." It referred to a life insurance policy that named a man none of the family recognized as a secondary beneficiary. The name was unfamiliar, and no one could trace the connection. The discovery added yet another question to the growing list of things that didn't match the public story. To the world, Paul Newman was the ideal husband, father, and humanitarian. To Nell, he was suddenly a mystery. Still loved, still respected, but no longer fully understood. But the fractures in the Newman family didn't start or end with secrets. They were also written in pain. Paul's only son, Scott Newman, struggled under the weight of his father's fame. Scott was talented in his own right, but living in Paul's shadow was a burden few could bear. He tried acting, racing, even music, but success never felt like his own. He once said, "Dad lives two lives, one for them and one for himself." It was a haunting reflection from a son trying to understand the man everyone else worshipped. When Scott died from a drug overdose at 28, it broke something deep in the family. The laughter in their home dimmed, replaced by quiet grief and a sense of guilt that no amount of fame or fortune could erase. After Paul's death in 2008, another wave of silence settled over the family, this time because of his will. His estate, worth hundreds of millions, was mostly left to his foundation, leaving little direct control to his wife or daughters. At first, Nell accepted it, trusting that it reflected her father's wishes. But in 2020, new documents surfaced showing differences between an earlier draft from 2006 and the final version signed in 2008. Signatures looked weak, clauses were missing, and witnesses had changed. It raised painful questions about whether Paul had full control of his decisions near the end of his life. Nell and her sisters took the matter to court, not to fight over money but to understand the truth. They claimed their father, frail and under heavy medication, may have been influenced by those managing his foundation. The case was dismissed, but the scars it left were emotional, not legal. It wasn't about wealth anymore. It was about trust, legacy, and truth. Then, in 2025, Nell Newman stepped in front of cameras for a rare and deeply emotional interview on CBS Sunday Morning. The world watched as she calmly addressed the stories that had swirled around her family for decades. She spoke about the will first, explaining that the final 2008 version wasn't the same document her mother and sisters had witnessed. The foundation, once a family-run mission of charity, was suddenly under the control of outsiders. She mentioned a man named Robert Forrester, the foundation's CEO, who had been unusually close to Paul during his final illness. Investigations later revealed several private meetings between Forrester and Paul while he was undergoing treatment and reportedly struggling with mental clarity. Nell didn't accuse anyone directly, but her words were carefully chosen. "We're not saying anyone did anything illegal. We're saying something doesn't feel right." But the moment that left the room silent came when she spoke about the whispers, the rumors that had followed her father for years. For the first time, she confirmed what many had suspected but never dared to say out loud. Paul Newman had shared a long-term romantic relationship with a man. "It's not a scandal," she said softly. "It's simply a truth that was never told." She explained that during her father's generation, even the smallest hint of such a relationship could destroy a career. Protecting that truth wasn't about shame. It was about survival. In the archives Yale University acquired in 2017, researchers found letters and photographs that seemed to confirm what Nell said. The letters were personal, tender, and signed in Paul's unmistakable handwriting. One note, written in 1978 to a man named Arthur Siegel, a photographer and editor he'd known for years, read, "When I'm with you, I feel freer than I ever did on screen." The revelation stunned fans who had idolized the perfect Hollywood marriage of Paul and Joanne. But for Nell, it wasn't about breaking her parents' image. It was about setting them free from the myths that had boxed them in. Joanne, she said, knew more than people realized. She was loyal, protective, and understood the complicated man she married. Their bond wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the simple fairy tale the world imagined either. It was a love that adapted, evolved, and sometimes hurt. It was human. After Nell's interview, media outlets rushed to revisit old archives, re-examining timelines, photos, and interviews that suddenly carried new meaning. Old footage of Paul on talk shows, his words about freedom and truth, now seemed to hold hidden layers. Reporters found that Nell's statements lined up with existing evidence. Travel records, letters, and interviews from close friends who had always hinted there was more to Paul's story than anyone knew. Some fans were shocked, others deeply moved, realizing that perhaps Paul Newman had spent his life trying to balance the person the world needed him to be with the person he really was. For Nell, sharing these truths wasn't about scandal. It was about healing. Growing up as the daughter of Hollywood icons meant living under a microscope, but it also meant inheriting the silence they left behind. By speaking openly, she hoped to show that truth doesn't erase greatness, it deepens it. Her father was still the man who used his fame to build children's camps, fund education, and inspire millions. He was still the actor whose blue eyes defined a generation. But he was also a man who carried secrets, desires, and struggles that shaped who he was beyond the screen. Paul Newman's story is no longer just about charm and success. It's about complexity, the beauty and pain of being human. Behind every smile and every trophy was someone searching for peace, belonging, and love that fit no easy label. And perhaps that's why his legacy endures. Because people like Paul Newman remind us that perfection isn't real, but authenticity is. The truth may change how we see our heroes, but it also brings them closer to us. In the end, Nell Newman didn't rewrite her father's story, she finished it. She gave the world a fuller picture, one that includes both his brilliance and his flaws, his courage and his secrets. The man who once said, "I have steak at home, why go out for hamburger?" now feels less like a legend and more like a man, brilliant, complicated, and trying to live honestly in a world that didn't always allow it. And as the world looks back at Paul Newman now, it's no longer just about the movies or the marriage, but about the life that happened between the lines, the private moments, the letters, the mistakes, and the truths that time tried to bury. Maybe that's the real legacy Nell wanted people to see. That behind every perfect love story is a human one, And behind every hero is someone still trying to understand himself. If you found this story as captivating as we did, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep and untold stories about the people we thought we knew best. Every legend has a side history never told, and we're here to bring those stories to light.